So Ghostrunner, the way I see it, is an indie studio shot at making a cyberpunk future sci-fi game that plays a bit like a mix of Mirror's Edge, Dishonored, Shadow Warrior, and maybe even a little bit of Titanfall 2. But it has the added difficulty of titles like Superhot and My Friend Pedro. That's the rub. Not only is it fast and frantic first-person parkour game, it's also made maddeningly hard by the fact that you can't get hit, not even once. You get shot, touch some deadly object or obstacle, you're dead. It's a game about absolute mastery of the movement controls, super precise traversal, area awareness, and meticulous planning for encounters. It's a combat game that's like a puzzle, or even chess. You have to move to take out threats by using the environment around you, making sure to prioritize certain enemies and remove them in an exact way or order. Fortunately for this game, it has some of the best movement tools and responsive movement for the genre. You almost always go in the direction you're pointed, jump precisely on the platform you need to without too much depth perception issues. Any mistakes made are always on you. It's player error and you know exactly when you've messed up. The movement feels floaty and fast the first time you start playing, but the actual jumping around stuff is a little bit unfamiliar. I've never had this type of control scheme used before. Using controller, mostly everything is on the shoulder buttons and triggers. What this actually does is allow for better directional and camera control without having to realign your finger placement on the face buttons. It takes a very long time to get used to how to move. It wasn't until the very end of the game that I was playing with muscle memory. It really does feel like the ultimate speedrunner game. You can move and change directions so insanely fast. There are so many ways you can get to where you need to, moves to chain together, and tons of exploitability with out of bounds and skip potential. With leaderboards and end score screens after every mission, you can even compete against other players for fastest level completion or least amount of deaths. You play as this dude called Ghostrunner, some kind of a man-machine hybrid. You fight it out against this female Doc Ock person in the opening titles and get beaten. Now you're on the run from her and her forces. It's a pretty bare bones and average story, but the gameplay takes over for any shortfalls in that department. As you play, you're slowly reintroduced to all your missing augments and abilities that Ghostrunners possess. All you have to fight off attackers with is your katana, which becomes fairly versatile for any situation given your crazy parkouring skills and some cybernetic skills to match. Not to mention, it's pretty sick looking. You even have the ability to taunt, just to look cool, showing off the blade, flipping it around when you're running. I just added in taunts whenever I was transitioning through running segments or between jumps. With some unlocks, you can even get some dope skins for it too, like this slick blue carbon fiber one, a rainbow glowy one, or one with kitties on it. On the katana, combat is pretty gory as well, with some brutal dismembering and slicing in half of bodies, finishing off with this flourishing splash of blood in the screen. Man, it feels so satisfying doing it. You start off with being able to run, jump, slide, grapple, wall run, and dash. You can jump and mantle up short walls, wall run infinitely across surfaces without losing speed or height, and transition between walls. Slide allows you to build or hold speed when sliding down a sloped surface or to avoid high attacks or obstacles. Grapple allows for you to connect to points on the map to traverse gaps or hook yourself back onto surfaces. Grappling itself, while it's common in most games, Ghostrunner seems to be the fastest and most responsive I've ever felt. The grapple point detection is spot on, and you can quickly pull whichever direction you need to when hooking onto points. Holding dash allows you to enter this slowdown mode called sensory boost, where you can alter your aerial direction and dash forward towards the direction you're holding. You use this for traversal, but also primarily for combat. This is pretty much the go-to tool you'll use against most shooty boys. With fast movement, some good angles, and tons of kinetic energy built up, you can just murder most people hit and run style. But when you are starting to build your speed, or you are in a restricted space, that's when you can rely on sensory boost. When you hold it, you can move to the side just as a shot is being fired off, even seeing the bullet leave the chamber in super slow-mo, completely avoiding its trajectory and then dashing in for the kill when the slowdown ends. The faster you're moving, the more speed you hold in sensory boost. This is vital for getting around enemies that have shields that block from the front. You just run up to them at speed, hold sensory boost sideways and sail around to their unprotected backsides. Dashing without the slowdown is used to dash forward over gaps, dash to the side to reach platforms, or dash up to grab onto things above you. Later on, when you enter the Cyber Void, you can unlock your innate Ghostrunner abilities. These are tied to progression and are slowly given back to you as the game goes on. You build focus, I think through chaining movement and kills, which then powers your abilities. The first one you get is Blink. This is a slicing dash that you can aim to target attacks onto multiple enemies in a line. When you activate the ability, you slow down time to be able to aim and line up targets, to then blast forward, even cutting through one enemy into the one behind them. Every time you enter the Cyber Void, you can get more abilities back, ones like a kinetic blast, a surging projectile slash, and even hacking enemies to attack each other. Some Cyber Void abilities are limited one-time power-ups that are handily placed within the level for you to utilize. You have an infinitely abusable slowdown one, which slows down everything around you, allowing for you to get past things like fans, but even better, running up onto unsuspecting enemies. Even the fastest firing machine gun dudes won't be able to hit you with this power up on. Then there's the super jump to launch you up high into the air to reach platforms, and ninja stars that you can throw out while wall running to kill people or to activate switches from range. Finally, with all your skills and tools, there are a few more augments that you can equip, as well as being able to upgrade your current skills. On this little grid, you can slot in these puzzle piece-like upgrades. The grid is limited in spaces at first, but will open up fully as the game goes on. You have to turn and rotate pieces to fit the ones you want. Some of these upgrades can show enemies' positions on the map, show collectibles, increase your slowdown and sensory boost, and even allow you to parry projectiles. Right before a bullet is about to hit you, you can swing your blade and it'll actually block and reflect the shot right back into the person who shot it, killing them. This opens up the game into an even crazier mix of spastically fast movement and traversal, adding insane levels of timing with shot reflections. Basically, even more ways you can approach combat, as if there weren't enough already. Are you mad enough to go for it? It's a handy tool in your arsenal in whichever case, and often you might just accidentally reflect a shot just out of a lucky reactive input. Now that's mostly everything you have to use against different enemies of the game. The normal enemies you're going to face are these slow firing pistol guys, but later on there are these machine gun guys who fire in bursts, having to avoid the hail of incoming bullets or just wait for them to reload. Jumpy melee guys, dudes who jump out at you when you get close and smash you off walls or while you're in the air. Shield guys who have front facing shields, mentioned them earlier. Katana dudes, who you have to face off against and parry their attack in order for you to be able to kill them in a stunned state. Probably the coolest enemies of the game in my opinion. Later on there are turret, snipers and robot enemies as well, having to run around to avoid their shots, find a way past their lines of sight, or just slide under their blasts. A unique factor to some encounters is shielded enemies. You actually have to go find and destroy these little shield generators before you can attack the enemies, making for a tricky bit of find and seek, while you have to avoid all the incoming fire from enemies that you can't take care of until the shield is down. Mostly all the missions have combat separated into these little encounter segments, where the door to the next area is locked, so you have to take out all the enemies to proceed. These segments are designed in a way that they are more like a puzzle than an arena. They give you just the right amount of tools like grapple points or wall runs for you to be able to approach the fight. You have obstacles that block fire if you take one path, you have a sneaky back path to come up behind an enemy, places where you can drop in from above, even power-ups hidden sometimes. Just so many different ways you can tackle the encounter, sorta a bit of trial and error in order to scope out the best approaches and safest way to take out targets. I can absolutely see this game having some amazing montages and kill showcases with some insane skills on display. But what helps, you can do it too. That's the beauty of the encounter layouts. They are naturally flowing and contain innumerable ways for you to get the job done, no matter your skill level. The first area of the game starts off being only small segments of a larger cyberpunk city, with each mission having linear segments of traversal portions and combat encounters. The first impressions of the setting I honestly wasn't too impressed with. For most of the starting game, you're inside these generic and repetitive factory levels. This isn't what I was expecting from the game at all. But yes, it does open up in later missions to actual outer city locales. This is where I feel Ghostrunner was the most enjoyable. I was so sick of sitting through these global timer conveyor belt platform factory levels. When you finally reach the city, it opens up way more. The usual future sci-fi stuff I was expecting from the beginning. The neon signs, the claustrophobic building designs, the blaring LED billboards, high-rises soaring into the clouds, and the zipline rails that connect it all. The flow of the city segments feels so much more fluid as well. This is where the game was actually becoming way more fun, and I could really feel my knowledge and control of the game building. Effortlessly chaining grapples into wall runs, leaping off rails onto platforms, zipping around the place like a crazy person, slashing away at enemies from above. But again, you get shoved away from the stuff I liked back into the boring old interior segments. The only defining feature to most of the mission flow, well, it's the bosses. While there are only like 3, and the first one isn't even a person, the level itself is the actual boss. With this insane tower of moving platforms, deadly lasers, and everything on a global timer. I cannot even articulate just how fucking stupid this boss was. It's bonkers. I don't even know how I even managed to beat it. It's not even about just grappling right or waiting out the rotating lasers. It's more about the height control when you grapple up and how long to delay for, as well as that tiny bit of aerial control when you grapple. Just dipping under a laser or pulling yourself through the slightest gap. I mean, just look at this footage and you can see how crazy it was. The checkpoints were so painful as well. I wanted to cry for how much progress I lost to have to go do it all again. I was getting pretty worried if this was what the game was throwing at me as the first boss. Then it transitioned into this wall running blast segment when the blast runs up the wall you're running on. Oh god, it was terrible. But I did it, I got through it, and then there was more pain with the next boss, an actual opponent this time, one with no checkpoints and having to parry every single one of her attacks that come out in a timed pattern. Jesus, don't know how they expect most people to be able to do this shit. I don't even think I want to remember how bad the last level was either. I was actually out of breath, the hardest thing I've ever played. It just throws even more ridiculous things at you. I was like, you can't be serious. You can't expect me to get through that. What the fuck is this shit? I was begging the game to just stop. Don't even ask me how I got through it. I put it down to luck and me going crazy. Crazy to the point that my pain was fueling me to get through it just to make it stop. Hell, I had to switch my playstyle to flicking my camera up in order to gain just a tiny bit more height each time I jumped. That's how stupid it all was. That being said though, Ghostrunner is understandably and purposely designed to be hard. Because it's one shot and you're dead, you can pretty much imagine how many times you're likely to die in this game. The more times you mess up is often when you get into this loop of death, just repeating the same single little mistake or getting killed by the same enemy. Everything you do, be it the way you traverse a level with chained together wall runs, jumps, dashes and slides, it all has to be perfect. Mistakes are often deadly or irreversible in the case of missing a jump, which you cannot save. You can abuse the wall running and stuff trying to get onto things that you shouldn't, or cut across places to skip steps in the level objectives, but often the linear path is the one you are restricted to. But the one very important thing to remember, it doesn't matter at all if you die. It doesn't even matter if you die like 100 times. Reloading from death is almost instant. The only issue is you'll have some painful checkpoints to deal with, having to go back through some long platforming all over again. Or you have to take out all the guys you almost perfectly killed all over again until you get it right the next time. The difficulty, trust me, it does almost disappear the more in tune you are with the game. When you know just how to jump perfectly, your range on dashes, getting the most out of the kinetic movement and momentum, it actually becomes fun. Going back and playing levels, you have the knowledge of the level layout and enemy placement down to a T. You can just blast through it. It's the speedrunning and flashy combat and traversal that pulls this game up out of the too hard category. When it works, it works. The controls, the environment, the movement. But sadly, for this console version of Xbox One X, Ghostrunner often doesn't just work, as Todd would put it. It's not the controls or the responsiveness that lets this game down. It's purely this horrible console port. I know you've been watching and thinking it. This game looks like garbage, and you're right. Put it up against a fairly mid-range display of the PC version, well, you can see the difference. It's like night and day. The smooth and detailed textures just aren't there. The ray tracing obviously isn't an option, but the reflective surfaces or mirrored lighting isn't there either. Well, it wasn't on the Xbox version for what I was seeing. I can show you a quick blast through the first level, side by side with the PC version, and you can see exactly what I mean. The frame rate can't keep up, meaning you end up in this fast forwarding when it does. Ghostrunner is really unstable as well. I had so many crashes. I had times where the textures and lighting went all dark and I couldn't say anything. The music just doesn't play on some missions, which is more distracting than you might think. And there's this noticeable grey tinge to everything in the game. Kinda reminds me of the latest RE games that had the same problem, only worse. On PS4 Pro it seems to be so much worse though. With screen tear so bad, I can't see how or not you're supposed to play it in that state. Strangely though, the PS4 Pro version looked to have the reflections, unlike my version. Plus, they even had better textures close up, as well as this rain effect that goes over the camera. But to round up this whole disaster, there is even a cross-platform and uniformly occurring game-breaking glitch. On one level, there are these fans that turn on for you to float on to get through the level, except sometimes they decide they don't want to turn on. Now being me, I managed to make myself dizzy and wall run up a 3-sided area to try to get out where I shouldn't, but in the end there was this impossible gap I just couldn't get across without the fans on. Restarting the entire level was the only way to fix it. Well, I say fix, it only turned on some of the fans this time, luckily the ones I needed. I know at this point the devs are saying that they have a patch for the glitches and graphics, but I honestly don't think that it can fix the graphics as much as what needs to be. It isn't close to what it was advertised as, be it on PC or not. Ghostrunner just looks so bad. Which is a shame because I already finished it, so I won't be able to experience how it's supposed to be even if there was a patch. There were some other issues as well, like repeating dialogue lines because you died when someone was talking. Disconnect to the story because it's being told during gameplay, so you don't have much time to pay attention. The story does actually open up into something amazing. Strangely, it's at the end credits though. It kinda sets up this really interesting game for a sequel if it gets made, one which has a bit more beef to the narrative. But yeah, I don't really want to have to give this game too much shit for how bad it looks and how bad it runs, but I kinda have to. It detracted so much from the game and made it a massive letdown as soon as I booted it up and saw the graphics that belong on the Switch version. The difficulty of the game may also get in the way of most people's experience with it. I did have a bit of doubt and thought, would this game be better if it was more like Shadow Warrior? I had so much more fun with that game, so much more freedom, and it all boils down to having a health bar, being able to take hits. I couldn't really make my mind up on this one. It's difficult by design, the levels at their core and the combat at its roots, it's all based on the one-shot mechanic. I do believe it's the difficulty and the repeating over and over that builds up your skill level, probably training you how to play the game correctly and moving more towards a speedrun-esque title. Then you actually play the game because it feels fun, it flows, and everything looks damn cool while you're doing it. The music in this game is a major part of my enjoyment with it as well. Not only do you need to pump up the bass, you need to start headbanging along with it. Super cool dubstep drops and electronic synthwaves tracks blasting into eardrums in your brain, pumping you through the levels at supersonic speed and flinging yourself everywhere like a maniac. The music keeping the pace and you rhythmically parkouring and slicing your way through each level along with the beat. So everything going for Ghostrunner comes down to music, style, fluid movement and controls. Where it's let down is story, performance, bland levels, length of the game, and one of the most important things to me, graphics. In the middle road is probably the difficulty and the checkpoints. That makes the game pretty hard to judge then, so maybe I'll just leave all my thoughts on the table and admit that I did enjoy a lot of the game, but there was so much I couldn't overlook just to justify saying it's a great game, because it's not. It's fairly disappointing in all honesty, and in no way is Ghostrunner a substitute for cyberpunk.